Hi, scholars. This is Keith Hamon, and welcome to Writing the Literary Analysis. This presentation is designed to help teachers like me introduce writing literary analyses to their students. And I downloaded it from the Purdue OWL. That's the online writing lab of Purdue University. Even though the OWL freely distributes this to literature teachers, I'm citing my sources to give credit to their fine work and to avoid plagiarism in my own work. You should do the same in your own essays. You should use information from recognized experts, and you should carefully inform your readers that you are doing so. Literary analysis is an argument about a literary work. Your purpose for making such an analysis is to help your reader understand the literary work better. After sharing your essay with me, your first task is to select the literary work that you want to analyze. You must select a work from the assigned works that the class is reading. Now, generally for Doc 1, you must select a short story, and for Doc 2, you must select a poem. For this presentation, I'll talk about Kate Chopin's short story, The Story of an Hour. It's the first story we read, and most of you have read it by now, so my examples will likely make some sense to you. Your second task in writing this essay is to read your work several times, closely and carefully. This is more important than you may think, especially if you're in a hurry to finish this task. But while you might read all the other stories quickly, you really do have to slow down for this one. Why? Well, because all your readers, your colleagues in the class, are reading the same story. They will get pretty much the same thing out of a quick reading that you did. Basically, what happened to whom, where, and when. You have to go beyond this cursory reading to find something deeper, something more involved and insightful. You must know more than your classmates about this story, or you really have nothing to say. This relative expertise takes time. Now, your third task is to explore the story of an hour through some literary concept. Some are listed here, such as plot, setting, and narration, and so forth, and your textbook discusses many more. You need only one, though. Remember that our essays are really rather short, so one concept is usually enough. For instance, you might consider the plot of the story. Your current notion of plot may be simply what happens in a story. Well, plot is more involved than that, so you need to learn more about plot as a literary device and how it works. Your textbook has a pretty good description of plot, but you can also find useful information on the net. Most of you will do a quick Google search and investigate the sites listed on the first page. This is a really bad idea. What you will find on the first few pages of a Google search are the commercial sites that paid Google to list them first. They want to make some money off of you. They are mostly for middle schoolers looking for a quick fix for their English papers. In most college classes, including this one, that kind of research will earn you a failing grade. You must do better. You must find sources that have academic integrity and credibility. Schmoop.com ain't it. Wikipedia may not be it either. It isn't so credible for most of your teachers. They don't like Wikipedia, and no doubt in the past you've been told don't use Wikipedia as a source. However, it's a great place to start. You can read this article here about the story of an hour, and you'll sort of get the lay of the land, so to speak. Good Wikipedia articles contain links to more authoritative and credible sources. Often, you can get all the sources you need for your short essay from a single Wikipedia article. Just remember to cite the good sources and not the Wikipedia article. Remember, most of your professors won't accept Wikipedia for credible research at the college level. Now, the easiest way to find credible sources about Plot, Kate Chopin, and the Story of an Hour is to connect to the library. We have an embedded librarian, Kristen Bailey, who is available to you with one click of the button, either on the class wiki under the Resources tab or on the D2L class homepage. You really must connect to her. I will check with her to see who has connected, and your name should be on that list. Now, writing is how we build meaning out of 26 letters and a handful of punctuation symbols. It's almost magic, and your job is to explain some of that magic to your colleagues. You really do have to know the terms for various aspects of a short story or poem, and you have to know how to use those terms in a meaningful way in your own essays. So don't call something a metaphor if it's really a symbol. Okay, when you say setting, understand what you're meaning. For instance, you might look at some of the various components of an individual work and how they relate to each other. How does Chopin, for instance, use characterization to develop her theme of freedom for women? You need to know what characterization and theme both are. Then you might look at how two separate literary works deal with similar concepts. For instance, you could compare or contrast how Chopin and Grace Paley handled the institution of marriage in their two stories, Story of an Hour and Once. You can also see how your literary work relates to larger aesthetic, political, social, economic, or religious context. You might explore, for instance, how Chopin's Story of an Hour does or does not match the historical institution of marriage in late 19th century America. Or explain for us what would have been the real-world economic implications for Louise Mallard if she had indeed had to live as a widow in 19th century America. What would have been the social implications? Well, as you can see, you can explore any story in countless different ways. Now, your textbook has several sample student papers, and each of them begins with a specific, arguable point, a thesis, that is developed and supported through the rest of the essay. For instance, in his analysis of Faulkner's A Rose for Emily, Josiah Parker, this is on page 50, writes, "This lifelong oppression becomes the central conflict and is what drives Miss Emily, causing her, quote, to cling to that which had robbed her," end quote. And in parentheses you put Faulkner, page 43, to cite where you got that quote. Now, you might disagree with Josiah's claim that Miss Emily's lifelong oppression is the central conflict of the story. You might think her conflict with Homer Barron is more central. So Josiah's task is to demonstrate to you why he believes it's so. The validity of his claim depends in large part on how well he can support it. Probably his grade depends on that as well. Your grade will. So make sure you defend your point with good reasons and evidence drawn from the text. And you've got to have a good thesis statement. Consider these 4 potential thesis statements in an essay about the novel Moby Dick. The first statement is far too broad and vague. Moby Dick is about the problem of evil. Really? You're going to explain the problem of evil in 3-page essay? I don't think so. You just can't cover the topic of evil in a short paper. The second thesis, Moby Dick is boring and pointless, is just an opinion based on personal likes and dislikes that is almost impossible to defend or support. The third thesis, Moby Dick is about a big white whale. It's just obvious. Everybody knows Moby Dick is a big white whale, so you haven't really said anything here. There's nothing to argue about or to explore. That's it. Your essay's over. The fourth thesis is the most likely to lead to a fine analytical essay. The use of whiteness in Moby Dick illustrates the uncertainty of the meaning of life that Ishmael expresses throughout the novel. It makes a claim about the theme of the novel, and it can be supported by the text of the novel itself and by outside experts. That's a fine thesis. Now remember that you must support your claim, your thesis, with evidence. The first and primary source of evidence is always the story itself. You should look for direct quotations, summaries, and paraphrase directly from the story. You should also use information from secondary sources such as the textbook's material about the story and the literary elements. Michael Meyer has lots to say, for instance, about Chopin, the story of an hour, and plot. Use that material to support your thesis. Then you should also look for material from literary experts. You'll find lots of them in the library, and Kristen Bailey can help you. Don't overuse secondary sources. Your argument should make sense even with no outside sources, which are really there only to support your argument, not to make your argument for you. And use Purdue's online writing lab, the OWL. It's an excellent source for information about how to write a literary essay. You want to bookmark the site and use its resources throughout your college career. If you have questions, ask me. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the net.